Our next speaker is Rowan Smith. Most of you will know Rowan, but Rowan spent 20 years in the LPG industry, longer than me, working for Rockgas, being involved in many projects, including significant expansion of Rockgas's flagship site at Woolston, Christchurch, and the expansion of the company reticulated networks. I assume Christchurch, is it, or all over the place? Yeah. He has extensive knowledge in technical and engineering aspects of the LPG industry, regulation and asset management. He's a member of, and I'd say a stalwart of, the technical committees and the Australasian Standards Committee for ASNZ 1596, which probably only the engineers will understand as to what that is, as well as being involved with the Canterbury Lifeline Utility Group. So, thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Albert. I have been with Rockgas for 20 odd years. I started in the early 2000s when the business was doing a fair bit of expansion into the reticulation around Christchurch. Just the reason that my role was established. And at the same time, we got more involved in the civil emergency preparedness stuff, and hence involvement with the Lifeline Utilities Group. Each of the civil defence regions have a Lifeline Utilities Group. Civil Defence Emergency Management Act prescribes certain utilities, so gas is in there, telcos, power, roads, waters, and the role of the Lifelines Utilities Group is to really, before states of emergency happen, is to allow the different utilities to work together to try and get their preparedness, increasing it, a fair bit of research, and just help to understand how we each going to perform during an emergency, but also provide a conduit into the Emergency Operations Centre when emergency actually happens. Now, I wasn't too sure who the audience would actually be, so I did put a bit of a thing about who Rockgas is, but it's probably largely present and converted here. I do want to highlight that there's different ways that we deliver gas, and obviously we're celebrating our 90th anniversary this year, which is pretty cool. So of course, we, like other LPG retailers, deliver cylinder gas to people's houses and businesses through cylinders, our bulk tanks, our articulation networks, and this is a wee snippet from our Christchurch one. We have networks in Wanaka and Queenstown as well, and of course we deliver that through our tanker fleet. Underpinning the preparedness element for civil defence stuff is the 4 R's. Reduction, readiness, response and recovery. Basis of reduction is to not be where the really bad stuff happens. A quick Google search for tsunami risk in Wellington pops up this map here, which I'll put in the middle, which shows the tsunami inundation along the Petone foreshore and up to the Hutt Valley. So those who know the Wellington area realise these are probably pretty key site for two retailers that may lie in within the orange or red zone, which then triggers that next element down, which is the readiness things. Sometimes you can't be away from the problem areas, so you need to start developing a readiness plan. How are you going to start responding from an asset point of view and a people point of view to keep your business going as well? Response is how you respond on the day of an event, and then recovery gets into how you start rebuilding your business back into it, things like your business continuity plans, etc. For Rockgas, we started designing our LPG network in the late 90s, early 2000s, and we looked at experiences from overseas. So 95, I think it was the earthquake in Kobe in Japan. We looked at what the experience utilities over there was, and very key telling what it was that those utilities that used polyethylene PE pipe had far more better outcomes. So that was pretty resilient pipe. It's pretty elastic. It's pretty likes stretching, or doesn't like it rather, but it does perform pretty well if it moves rather. Second bullet point there is the OPSO regulators. A lot of people understand OPSOs, which is overpressure shutoff, where the downstream pressure on the pipeline increases in pressure. The regulator will trip off. You can also buy an option for an underpressure, which monitors that pressure as well. So if it goes low pressure, it'll trip as well. That's pretty key when I come up with the next slide too, or later on. From a resilience point of view, across our overall network, it's not just about the individual assets, but it's how we can deliver gas as well. So part of that is within your individual site. Do you have redundancy in your equipment? Do you have multiple sites that can supply gas if one site is down? In the Christchurch reticulation network, we do have multiple feeders that we can supply gas into it, and that was deliberate with how we put into it. We also had some strategic cylinder stores that if we couldn't fill cylinders, had no power on site for a couple of days, we would then just draw on those and they could do the deliveries into customer sites from there as well. Critical spares, knowing what you need in times of emergency, but where they're located, don't put them in the problem areas again. Contractor risks, who are the contractors you're going to call upon, and what are their risks, what are their Achilles heel of them, how are they going to get around. And the last one's a business risk, which comes back to the clouds, the server type conversation, business continuity type stuff. The earthquake in Christchurch was 2011, so a few years ago, and the digitisation, portable data wasn't as readily available, Starlink wasn't available, and hence the move that a lot of businesses are now doing, moving to more cloud-based systems, actually provides another whole level of resilience as well. A reasonably good life rule, which I think is quite good, 5 Ps. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. Sometimes there's a 6P added into it, but I think that underpins really what this is all about. We all have our plans, our emergency response plans that we may call upon when an event happens. We may have business continuity plans, those type of things as well. But without really testing them, people don't know how they respond. We need to make sure that people understand what they're doing, when they're doing it, and how they can do it as well. The second bullet point there, know who the right people are. That's pretty critical. And when you're in times of strife or crisis, trying to find out who to call can be a bigger hindrance than actually making a call too. So the value of these sort of forums is to meet the people who you may need to know and may need to get hold of. And it's not just within your own world. I think as a group, as a bunch of LPG retailers, we had a fair bit of collaboration following the earthquakes to try and help each other out too. So I think that's one really good story that we do have. Yes, we compete day to day on a commercial element, but when the crap really hits the fan, we all stand up as an industry and do help each other have that. The last 2 bullet points there really are about the people and getting familiarisation with them, with the plans, so that they know where the plans are, how to initiate them. But the last one really about empowering them to actually know how to respond. They may not need the management oversight or management approval because they may not be available, but they can just step up and do the work themselves. But fundamentally, plan for the worst, even if you can't imagine it happening. Within Rockgas, when we put our networks together, relivening a network if it loses pressure is a pretty big job because you have to isolate all the connections, you repressurise your mains, prove that up, and then relive each individual connection thereafter. Our business ethos until February 2011 had actually been never turn the retic off. So that was an underpinning element to it. February 22nd, 2011. It was 10 to 1 on the lovely late February morning. I should notice that Gabrielle happened the week before, a few years later, but so obviously late February is a problem child for civil problems. Our facility in the south-east Christchurch, and we had several months of aftershocks following the September 2010 earthquake come through. And when you live through several hundred of them, you become a bit of a connoisseur as to what happens, what the noise means, how much the shaking means. And most of the earthquakes had been preceded by a large roaring noise that you could basically see how long the noise takes to get to you before the shaking starts, a bit like your thunder and lightning story, to see how intense or how localised the earthquake was. This one just hit us bang. There was no warning to it, just massive shaking immediately as well. So, bit of startling thing. We got under Bill's desk, did its job, and we evacuated out. We had a couple of minor leaks on our facility next door, but in the pipework and a cylinder somehow fell over and the valve opened. But that just vented down and it was made safe thereafter. We had no damage to our building. And without the lead of the noise coming into it, gave us a pretty good indication that the earthquake itself was pretty localised around our facility. So our perception there was that, okay, this is a big shake, likely, but didn't seem too bad elsewhere. Our feeder plant was feeding out about 80% of the normal load, so that makes sense. Maybe people evacuated, turn the plants off. We're going to just go and start doing the job as well. Quite quickly, we got a good indication from our cylinder delivery fleet. We had 15, 18 trucks out on the road about the scale of damage across the city. We started getting pretty good understanding that wide variety of damage from east through to east, east through to west rather. But it wasn't really until we had our contractor arrive, so Gas Engineering came around, and they were closer to the central city, and their experience, they said, it's all hectic in town. Their first job, having evacuated their workshop, was they were called just to a local business to duck around and try and help a person who had run out during the earthquake. Fortunately, the wall had collapsed onto them, and they didn't survive. So now shit gets real, because it's basically now we knew that a bit more damage around than what we initially had understood as well. Our initial response is typical of what the damage that we saw. We had reports of gas leaks. We were issuing some contractors with valve keys to start isolating sections of our mains. But typically the building facades were falling off and pulling gas meter sets off the wall. We had one feeder plant that was more in the central city. It was a backup plant that never actually fed. One of the staff members went out and heard the gas meter just screaming. It was feeding so much gas into the network. So well, that's not normal. And counter to our business ethos about never turn it off, he actually went and turned it off, which highly commend that, because it did have an impact on how things went. Getting around was very problematic. That photo on the top right-hand side there shows pretty typical roads. Lots of liquefaction around that manifests itself in flooded waters, which covered in silt. And then you can't actually see any large potholes, which some people unfortunately drove into, or sinkhole rather. So that first car, the power in the middle there, has this half submerged. Phones were down. There's a fair bit of personal uncertainty because, of course, you had no comms. I didn't actually confirm that my family was okay for about 4 or 5 hours, but can't really do much about it because you're stuck doing your thing, and getting around is pretty problematic too. So there's an emotional element. Some people who may in normal life seem reasonably strong people crumble, and some people who are right dickheads in the real world, in the day job, actually really step up and are really impressed. So you're never quite sure how people perform, and it's gone to actually been through it. They usually get a measure for yourself as well. But they evaluate as far as possible, because if you have limited knowledge and limited comms, you need to basically, when we made a call to, you think you know what's going on, but you're not too sure. We actually found more information through our colleagues in Wellington. We got the occasional phone call come through us. I'm like, have you seen the TVs? No, there's no power. So we found out about the extent of the damage mainly through our colleagues. That's right. But then Civil Defence got hold of us and said, shut it down. There's lots of buildings down, lots of gas leaking in the central city. So we did that. Again, a bit nervous doing it, but again, when it all hits the fan, it needs to be done. How we performed, so because we had a business mentality of never started off, we never had a plan to restart it. So a black start on the network was like, well, let's actually, how do we start doing that? So remember the first day or thereafter, we actually got together at the Gas Engineering workshop. That was came through it pretty well, and we had to develop a relivening plan. We determined that the western side of the city wasn't too badly affected. We had power onto one of our feeders over that side, and we also determined that the UPSOs did their job. The networks they all tripped off. The network held some residual pressure that proved to us there weren't gaping holes in it, and basically we then developed a relivening plan with some remote peer review risk assessment from Wellington, which is where our crisis management team at that phase was based. And then we reliven sections, liven the main up, disconnect, isolate all the laterals, pressurize up the main, do a drop test on it for a few hours, leak check it, and then next section while the connection crew come and do. So we ran in 2 different crews. We had support from Origin Energy at that stage. We were owned by them. Sent a bunch of gas fitters over there too, from Aussie to help us reliven it. They're just little hiccups within that, but I'll touch on that later as well. There'll be people in the room here who do participate in the crisis management teams, and they'll be remote from those things. And I think this is something that, as a person who was locally responding to it, the frustrations that we felt, trust your people. However, challenge them, because there is a great amount of emotion going on at the same time. Make sure that the decisions that they are making are well regarded. We had CMT making decisions over a 4 or 5 hour period, and they would have a agenda to work through, and they'd release all these decisions at up to 5 hours, when in fact the first decision could have been released up the first half an hour, and we could start actioning that in the field too. So provide runners to get through your agenda decisions, convey them out as well. The other thing that pissed us off was that they all packed up and went home at 4:30. And that's nice, but we kept working until 9 o'clock at night because literally people had low houses, and that's a pretty common picture of all the silt that happened thereafter, but just sort of shows the extent that was damage around houses and the streets as well. As I mentioned before, we found pretty quickly about the extent of damage was across the city was very, very variable. Some houses were absolutely stuffed, some houses you couldn't live in, some houses you could poke your hand through the wall and get outside. But the 9 kg stuff here, the gas availability, and much to what Martin said before, is paramount, because without your boiled water noses, without heating, without cooking, it's a pretty average life. So 9 kgs kind of fall under the radar, but I think they're remarkably versatile. Well, the fuel, and I actually like one of the photos that Dave had yesterday. I was thinking of the guy with a cylinder on his shoulder. Need be, you can put a cylinder on your shoulder and walk it home. You can put 2 9s walking down the road if you have to as well. We had backup plans, and we understood our critical customers, particularly on our reticulation network. We're mindful that we had old people's homes, hospitals, those type of things too. So keeping gas onto those people are very, very important. We had some of our key customers had connection points to allow us to plug a tanker into that, so we could actually feed up directly into the network if we needed to. Proved that up once. We had spare cylinders and manifolds available. In fact, that's where I say basically no critical customers, but also their dependence on others, because we spent a bit of time putting manifolds onto old people's homes, but they didn't evacuate it because they had no sewer system. So there's no point doing that, because it's a waste of things. So understand where you actually may be needed. Bottom right-hand corner down there just sort of shows the red zones around Christchurch Central City. WorkSafe, sorry. Civil Defence directed us just to isolate all the gas, and so we did. So over a period of time, we relivened them where we could, but the Central City was just isolated and chopped off for many, many months to allow demolition. Much to Martin's point about the LCC stuff earlier, we put manifolds on the old people's homes. The big problem we had was we couldn't get a certificate back in those days. There were test certificates, but having an inspector come and certify the installation slowed processes down, put more stress onto the whole process too, but there is a lack of flexibility in that. People are pretty key to response, because they're the ones doing the gas movement around, they're the ones delivering it, they're the ones filling cylinders. So they need support, and it's pretty stressful. You don't get to go home and not think about it. You're living and breathing it, so the development plan to allow your staff to have time off is really, really cool. It's important, rather. But cash is king, because when you queue for 6 hours to refuel your car, which actually happened, you can jump into the cash queue and you can certainly go a lot faster. There'll be no comms, there won't be any banking things, EFTPOS won't work. You can't beat $1,000 cash in your back pocket. Again, 9 kg cylinders, really, really important, to the extent that, a bit of a comedic thing now, our CEO very kindly announced to the media before we told ourselves that free gas to everyone, which added a whole lot of stress to particularly a distribution team who had to then suddenly, oh my God, what? So we had queues down there. Good PR, but really stressful at the right time. Maybe we could try and do that a little bit differently as well. Just last thing I was to touch on there, summary, is how versatile the LPG can be. We have, so those delivery methods that I mentioned at the very second slide, we can interchange those pretty readily. Literally, this chopper here wasn't Christchurch one, this was one that sort of a stock image, but we did put cylinders into Defence Force to fly into Kaikoura during the Kaikoura the 7 earthquakes, because the roads were chopped off. So there is the flexibility. We can just literally pick it up and carry it and drop the energy off it and readily no funders. And the last is, there's this example of that SNG mixing system that David mentioned yesterday too, so that was good. Last few things, communications worked really well. One thing I didn't mention, so we did figure out that in our planning stages that our phones wouldn't be down, so we got some handheld public band radios, line of sight things, which was really cool, until we moved site around behind the hill, and that meant that the radios were useless because we didn't have any comms at all. Your relationships that you form beforehand are pretty key. Lifelines, utility groups are your conduit into getting stuff you need. Martin, you mentioned before about getting the generator from your lifelines from Civil Defence. That's the conduit that you can go into. So a big key part of each of the sites is to understand and get involved with the Lifeline utilities groups. There are coordinators who stand up, and their job is to talk to Lifelines, the utilities, and say, what's your status, what do you need, what's the hindrance? As I said before, cash rules, can't beat that. Right equipment, right people, but I didn't add, but I should have. Right location at the right time. So you need to make sure that, yes, you may not have some strategic spares, the supplier's going to have that, but do they have the same level of understanding that they need to get it and dispatch it past 8 at night or whatever? So having that support structure, or having what you need behind it, is fundamental. Regulatory framework, I'm pleased, Martin, you mentioned that you spoke to WorkSafe about the inflexibility of it. I think it's appalling for the HAZSAR world. In COVID, it was very evident. PCPR world and HAZSAR world, PCPR, I will come to that. HAZSAR world, it was just ridiculous. So I would support if we as an association can advocate for it. Particularly in states of emergency, I think we can start saying, well, there needs to be flexibility, but done safely, but some local provision to allow us to perfectly. So we can't deliver gas to your welfare centre because we haven't got a certificate. That's a pretty sad way of doing things. Small things will trip you up. We did have a generator on the site. We had paid for the option to make sure that the coolant on it never got too low, and the 30-cent switch failed and the generator wouldn't start, which then had to get Spark involved, and we couldn't actually get that gen set running for a couple of days because we didn't have the right parts. UPSs that fell off, Paul, that the tie-downs, the earthquake seismic tie-downs didn't work and they ripped cables out. Something as simple as your phone charges. How are we going to charge your phone with no power? My cable's in the building, I can't get back in the building. That's all the little minor things too. But my last thing I want to just really say to everyone is that the resilience of people is incredible. Mark touched on it too, that the well-being within the community, everyone still thinks we're now very isolated and we sit on our phones and don't care, it's all self-focused. When the crap goes down, people really do step up and help each other out. And I think we can rely on that to some degree, help it out, support it. But basically we do need to support the people themselves, those helping us out, the communities that we ultimately, everyone uses gas as a person, so we need to make sure we do support that as well. Cool. Thank you, sir. Any questions? Or do you like to end that help? Much?
When the cell phone down here, what people go back to my cell phone now, you don't have it anymore, so you need paper copies. You need people that walk the network on a regular basis and know where everything is so they can know that. So it's like it's about to rely on leadership.
That's really important. So Marshall does work for our network for bots in Christchurch, and we provide valve keys. We've got valves in certain sectors of it, but interestingly, a mechanism or response to earthquakes, and you start thinking about it, does make some sense. Roads are just basically ribbons laid on ground, and that moves. And so you open a Toby up to see where my valve is, and the valve's gone because the road's moved, but the valve's gone that way and you can't get to your valve. So it's something as simple as that. So where is my valve? Okay, move to the next one. So it's something that you just normally work and try and do. You can't do, and it does actually stop me a lot of problems. So cool. Thank you.